You walk into a room you've passed 100 times, and this time the door is open. Inside, the air is different. Cooler. Stiller. You didn't force the door. You didn't plan to enter. You were simply walking, and the conditions were right, and now you're standing in a space you've only heard about. The jhanas are like this. They are not spiritual achievements you chase down. They are rooms that become available when the mind goes quiet enough to notice the door was never locked. In early Buddhist teaching, the jhanas are described as states of deep meditative absorption. The word itself means something close to meditation or contemplation, but it points to a specific quality of concentration where the mind becomes unified, collected, and temporarily free from the noise of wanting and resistance. There are traditionally 8 jhanas, though the first 4 are most commonly discussed. They are not mystical visions. They are not out-of-body experiences. They are natural capacities of a calm and focused mind. You might wonder why they matter. The Buddha taught them not as ends in themselves, but as tools. When the mind becomes deeply concentrated, it also becomes pliable. Insights arise more easily. The grip of craving loosens. You see the nature of experience more clearly because you're not constantly pulled into reaction. The jhanas are like sharpening a blade before you carve. They prepare the ground. But they are also misunderstood. Some practitioners treat them as spiritual merit badges. Others dismiss them as distractions. Both miss the point. The jhanas are simply what happens when certain conditions come together: sustained attention, a sense of ease, a letting go of the usual mental chatter. They are not rare. They are not reserved for monks in caves. They are available to anyone willing to sit quietly and meet their own mind with patience. Let's return to that room. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is how your breathing slows. Not because you're controlling it, but because the space invites it. There's a quality of pleasure here, subtle but unmistakable. Not the pleasure of getting what you want, but the pleasure of not needing to chase anything. This is the texture of the first jhana. The mind has settled on a single object, usually the breath, and it rests there with a kind of gentle joy. There's still some thought, still some movement, but it's quieter now. The usual urgency has softened. You don't stay in that first room forever. If the conditions deepen, if you continue to let go, you might find yourself moving into the second jhana. Here, even the subtle effort of sustaining attention begins to fall away. The mind doesn't need to check in anymore, it simply rests. The joy becomes more refined, less about the novelty of calm and more about the depth of it. Thought becomes optional. You're not thinking your way through the experience. You're simply here. These states are not always dramatic. Sometimes they arrive so quietly you almost miss them. You might sit down expecting nothing, and after 20 minutes you realize your body has disappeared from your awareness, not because it's gone, but because the mind is so absorbed it no longer tracks the usual sensations. Or you might feel a wave of contentment that has no object, no reason, just a quality of being that feels complete. The later jhanas move further into stillness. The third brings a kind of contentment without the energetic quality of joy. The fourth is marked by equanimity, a deep and neutral clarity where even pleasure is set aside. Beyond these, the formless jhanas explore the edges of perception itself, but they are not our focus here. What matters is understanding that these states are not foreign. They are what the mind does when it is no longer divided against itself. The Buddha did not invent the jhanas. He learned them from teachers before him. What he added was context. He saw that these states, as peaceful as they are not liberation. They are temporary. When you leave the room, the door closes behind you, and you return to the world with all its friction and noise. But something has changed. You know now that the room exists, You know the mind is capable of this kind of stillness, and that knowledge shapes how you meet everything else. So we begin here, not by straining toward absorption, but by learning what allows it, by noticing what the mind does when it's given permission to rest, by sitting down again and again and letting the breath be enough. There is a kind of effort we bring to meditation that feels responsible. We sit down, set the timer, and begin to gather the mind. We want to do it right. We want to go deep. And so we press gently at first, then with more insistence when the mind wanders. We tighten our attention the way we might grip a steering wheel on a difficult road. This feels like concentration. It feels like we are working towards something real. But the jhanas, those states of deep meditative absorption the Buddha described, do not arrive through force. They emerge when conditions align. And the primary condition is not effort, it is ease. A bird landing on water shows us something about this. If it comes down too hard, it breaks the surface and sinks. The landing becomes a struggle. But if it hesitates, hovering just above, it never makes contact. The bird must meet the water with just enough presence to touch down, and just enough softness to rest there. Neither grasping nor avoiding. The same is true when the mind approaches stillness. We have been taught in most areas of life that more effort brings better results. Study harder, work longer, push through resistance. And so we carry that same logic into meditation. When the mind wanders, we pull it back. When attention scatters, we clamp down. We think this is discipline. But what we are actually doing is creating tension. And tension is the opposite of the condition that allows absorption to occur. The Buddha once spoke to a student who was struggling with his practice. He asked him about the lute he used to play. If the strings are too tight, what happens? They break or produce a harsh sound. If they are too loose, no sound comes at all. The right sound arises when the string is tuned to just the right tension, not straining, not slack. The mind is the same. It finds its way through balance, not through force. This does not mean we do nothing. It means we learn to recognize the difference between guiding and gripping. When you sit and bring attention to the breath, there is a natural gathering that happens. The mind begins to settle. But if you notice yourself tightening around that settling, if you feel your attention becoming rigid or your body becoming tense, that is the sign that you have moved from allowing into striving. Striving feels active. It feels like progress. But it creates a kind of friction in the mind. You can feel it in the body, a subtle hardness in the face, a holding in the chest, a sense that you are keeping something in place rather than letting it arrive. This friction prevents the deepening that leads to absorption. The mind cannot rest when it is being held, so the practice is not to concentrate harder. The practice is to notice when you are pushing. Sit for 10 minutes and simply watch. Not to fix anything, not to improve anything, but to see clearly what is happening. When the mind wanders and you bring it back, notice the quality of that return. Is there harshness in it? Is there a sense of correcting a mistake? Or is there a gentle redirection, the way you might turn your gaze from one thing to another without any story about having looked away? You will likely find both. There will be moments when the return is soft and moments when it is tight. Neither is wrong. You are simply learning to feel the difference. And in learning to feel it, you begin to release the tightness without having to force the release. It happens on its own when it is seen clearly. This is where the bird returns. When it meets the water with the right touch, it does not have to work to stay afloat. The water holds it. The same happens in meditation. When the mind meets the breath or meets stillness with the right quality of attention, neither too much nor too little, it begins to rest there naturally. You do not have to hold it in place. The conditions hold it. This is what opens the door to the jhanas. Not a technique, not a special method, just the gradual learning of how to stop interfering. The deepening happens when the effort that was blocking it falls away. You may have been taught that concentration requires intensity, that going deep means pushing past distraction. But the Buddha's teaching points elsewhere. The lute string is not forced into tune. It is adjusted until the sound is clear. And once it is clear, no further adjustment is needed. The music plays itself. Sit for 10 minutes. Let the breath be there without making it behave. When attention drifts, bring it back lightly. Notice when you are pushing. Notice when you are allowing. The difference is subtle, but it is everything. Absorption does not come from adding effort. It comes from releasing the effort that was never needed. The mind scatters because we have not yet learned to gather it with kindness. This is not a failure. It is simply what untrained attention does. It moves toward the next sound, the next thought, the next pull of worry or planning. The scattering is innocent. It happens because the mind has been shaped by years of reaching outward, and it does not yet know how to rest inward without force. When you sit to meditate, you may notice this almost immediately. The intention is clear. You want to be with the breath. But within seconds, the attention drifts. A memory surfaces, a task appears, the body shifts. This is not distraction in the way we usually mean it. It is the natural movement of a mind that has not yet found its center. The Buddha described a state called the first jhana. It arises when the mind is unified with the breath, accompanied by joy and ease, born of seclusion. This is not a distant achievement. It is what happens when attention gathers itself, not through effort, but through repeated gentle return. The joy is not manufactured. It comes from the relief of no longer being pulled in 10 directions at once. Think of water in a glass after someone has stirred it. At first, the particles swirl. Everything is cloudy. You cannot see through to the bottom. But if the glass is left alone, the movement begins to slow. The particles drift downward. The water clears. This is not because you commanded it to clear. It is because the conditions for clarity were allowed to be present. The mind works in much the same way. When you stop stirring it with new input, new reactions, new judgments, it begins to settle on its own. The practice is simple, though not always easy. You sit in a place where you will not be disturbed. You close your eyes or lower your gaze. You bring your attention to the place where the breath enters and leaves the body. For most people, this is at the nostrils. You may feel a coolness as the air comes in, a warmth as it goes out. You may feel the slight touch of air against the skin. You do not need to control the breath. You are not trying to make it deeper or slower. You are simply noticing what is already happening. You begin by counting. 1 breath in, 1 breath out. That is 1. The next breath in, the next breath out. That is 2. You count to 20. This is not to test yourself. It is to give the mind a structure, a rhythm it can follow. The counting is a kind of scaffolding. It holds the attention steady while the mind learns what steadiness feels like. Within a few breaths, the mind will wander. This is certain. You will reach 3 or 4, and suddenly you are thinking about something else entirely. When you notice this, you do not scold yourself. You do not start over with frustration. You simply return. You place the attention back at the nostrils. You begin again from 1. The return is the practice. The wandering is not the problem. The problem is only if you wander and do not notice, or if you notice and then criticize yourself for wandering. Each time you return, the mind learns something. It learns that attention can be gathered. It learns that the breath is a reliable place to come back to. It learns that there is a difference between being pulled by thought and resting with sensation. This learning happens in the body, not in the intellect. You cannot think your way into steadiness. You can only practice it, breath by breath. As you continue, you may notice moments where the counting feels easier. The breath becomes more vivid. The sensations at the nostrils grow clearer. There may be a sense of ease in the chest or the shoulders. This is the water beginning to clear. The stirring has not stopped completely, but it has slowed enough that you can sense the difference. The mind is still moving, but it is moving in a smaller space now. It is circling closer to the breath. Sometimes a kind of pleasure arises. It is subtle at first. Not excitement, but a quiet gladness. This is the joy the Buddha spoke of. It comes from seclusion, from stepping back from the constant demand to react and respond. The mind has been running for so long that even a few moments of rest feel nourishing. You do not need to do anything with this joy. You do not need to hold on to it or make it bigger. You simply let it be part of the experience, the same way you let the breath be part of the experience. You continue counting. 20 cycles. If you lose count, you start again. If the mind becomes very still, you may let the counting drop and simply rest with the breath itself. The point is not to finish the 20 cycles perfectly. The point is to keep offering the mind a place to return to. With each return, the gathering becomes a little more familiar. The attention learns its own steadiness. You begin to feel what it is like when the mind is not scattered, when it rests in one place without needing to be anywhere else. There is a pleasure that comes in meditation when the mind settles. It arrives quietly at first, a softness in the chest, a warmth behind the eyes, a sense of the body dissolving into something easier. This is not imagination. It is real. The Buddha spoke of it openly. He called these states jhanas, and he said they were part of the path. But he also said something else. He said that the moment we reach for this pleasure, the moment we try to hold it or make it stay, we step out of the conditions that allowed it to come. Sunlight warms your face when you stand in the right place at the right time. You do not create it. You do not own it. You cannot cup it in your hands and carry it inside. The warmth is there because conditions align. The angle of the earth, the absence of clouds, your presence in that particular spot. If you try to grasp the light itself, your hand closes on nothing. The same is true for the pleasure that arises in deep concentration. It comes when the mind is steady, when attention is unified, when craving has quieted enough that space opens. But craving does not disappear just because the mind feels good. It shifts. It becomes subtler. Instead of wanting something outside approval, comfort, distraction, it begins to want the state itself. It leans forward into the pleasure. It tries to make the pleasure stronger, longer, more reliable. And in that leaning, the conditions break. You might notice this in your own practice. You sit down and the breath becomes smooth. The body softens. A sense of ease spreads through the chest, and then a thought arrives. This is it. You have found something. You want more of it. You adjust your posture slightly, trying to deepen the feeling. You focus harder, hoping to lock it in. And just like that, the ease begins to flicker. The breath feels less natural. The body tenses in small ways you did not intend. The pleasure does not grow. It fades. This is not failure. This is just what happens when we mistake a guest for a possession. The jhanas are not achievements to be collected. They are not proof of progress or skill. They are states that arise when the mind is in a particular relationship with experience, a relationship of allowing, not grasping. When we try to own them, we step out of that relationship. The teaching here is simple, but it asks something difficult. It asks us to receive pleasure without leaning into it, to notice joy without trying to make it stay. This is not the same as pushing pleasure away. Aversion breaks the conditions just as surely as craving does. If you feel ease in meditation and immediately think, "I should not want this," you have just introduced tension. You have turned toward the pleasure in order to resist it, and that is still a form of clinging. What is being pointed to is something more spacious. You can notice that pleasure has arrived. You can feel the warmth of it, the way it softens the edges of awareness, and you can let it be there without leaning. Like sunlight on your face, you do not need to do anything with it. You do not need to make it mean something. You do not need to prove you deserve it or worry about when it will leave. It is here now. That is enough. In practice, this looks like a very light touch. You are sitting. The breath is steady. A sense of calm begins to gather. You notice it. You feel it in the body, maybe a loosening in the shoulders, a coolness behind the eyes, a gentle brightness in the chest. And then you notice the impulse, the small movement of mind that wants to hold on. You do not judge that impulse. You do not try to crush it. You just see it. You see the reaching. And in seeing it, you do not follow it. This is not a technique you force. It is more like catching yourself mid-lean and softening back. The pleasure may stay, it may deepen, it may fade. All of that is fine. What you are practicing is not control over the state. You are practicing a different relationship with what arises. You are learning to let conditions do their work without interference. The Buddha did not teach the jhanas as escapes. He taught them as part of the path because they show the mind what is possible when craving quiets. But he also warned against mistaking them for the destination. The pleasure of concentration is still conditioned. It arises and it passes. If we cling to it, we suffer when it goes. If we see it clearly as a guest, not a possession, we can receive it fully without being trapped by it. We sit down to meditate and immediately begin working. We adjust the posture. We count the breath. We note what arises. We follow instructions we've read or heard, believing that if we do them correctly, something will happen. A door will open. A state will arrive. The mind will finally settle into that deep absorption we've been promised. But the jhanas do not come from doing more. They come from doing less. A leaf falls through still air. No one is making it fall. There is no effort in the descent, no technique required. The leaf simply releases from the branch and gravity does what gravity does. The air holds it for a moment and then it continues. The falling is not an achievement. It is what happens when holding stops. We have been taught to think of meditation as a skill to master. We practice concentration. We develop steadiness. We aim for absorption, as if it were a target we could hit with enough precision. And there is some truth in this at the beginning. The mind does need training. Attention does grow steadier with repetition. But at some point, the very effort we are making becomes the obstacle. Zazen is not about achieving a state. It is about sitting down and letting the mind be as it is. This is not permission to drift or daydream. It is not an invitation to slackness. It is something more precise. You sit upright. You face the wall or the room. You let the breath move without controlling it. And then you stop trying to get anywhere. You stop managing the mind. You stop checking to see if you're doing it right. You simply sit, and you let whatever is present be present. The jhanas are often described as stages, as if they were rooms you enter one after another. First jhana, second jhana, third, each one deeper, each one quieter. And there is a progression, yes, but the progression is not something you climb. It is something that unfolds when the conditions allow it. When the mind is no longer grasping for the next moment, when attention is no longer divided between what is happening and what should be happening, the mind naturally settles. It does not settle because you made it settle. It settles because you stopped disturbing it. Think of sitting by a pond. The surface is rippled, stirred by wind or by your own movement. You want to see the bottom clearly, so you reach in and try to smooth the water with your hands. But every motion creates more ripples. The more you try to calm it, the more disturbed it becomes. The only way the water becomes still is if you stop touching it. You sit back, you wait, and slowly, without any effort from you, the surface clears. This is what happens in meditation when we stop trying to meditate. You might sit for 15 minutes without doing anything at all. No counting, no noting, no visualization, no mantra, just sitting. The breath comes and goes on its own. Sounds arise and pass. Thoughts appear, linger, dissolve. You do not follow them, but you do not push them away either. You simply let them be part of the sitting. There is no technique here. There is only presence. At first, this might feel like nothing is happening. The mind will want a task. It will want to know what it is supposed to be doing. It will feel restless or bored or anxious. Let that be there too. Do not try to fix it. Do not try to create calm. Just sit and let the mind move however it moves. After some time, you may notice that the restlessness softens. Not because you made it soften, but because it was never solid to begin with. Restlessness is just energy moving through the body, thoughts cycling through the mind. When you stop feeding it with resistance or commentary, it begins to settle on its own. The mind does not become blank, it becomes spacious. Thoughts still arise, but they do not pull you in the same way. The breath continues, but you are not managing it. You are simply there, sitting, present, without needing anything to be different. This is not a special state. It is not something you will recognize as an achievement. It is quieter than that. It is the mind resting in itself, without fabrication, without the constant hum of trying. A leaf falling through still air, no one making it fall. Just the natural unfolding of what was already there. The jhanas are not constructed. They are what remains when construction stops. You do not enter them by doing more. You enter them by releasing the grip you have been holding without realizing it. And that release is not something you can force. It happens when you stop trying to make it happen. When you sit down, let go of the agenda and simply be present with what is. There is a kind of quiet that doesn't need anything from you. It doesn't need you to hold it together or keep it going. It simply is. But before that quiet can settle fully, the mind has to stop doing one particular thing. It has to stop talking to itself. Not in a dramatic way, not by force, just by seeing that the talking isn't needed anymore. When you first sit down to practice, the mind is often busy. It thinks about the breath. It examines the sensations. It checks whether you're doing it right. It wanders off and comes back. All of this is normal. This is the mind learning to steady itself. You're not doing anything wrong when this happens. You're just at the beginning of a process that naturally unfolds. But there comes a point where something shifts. The breath doesn't need to be followed anymore. The body doesn't need to be scanned. The mind has found its footing. Concentration has steadied. And in that steadiness, a kind of simplicity becomes possible. The mind can rest in the feeling of calm itself, without needing to think about it or manage it. This is where the second jhana begins. It's not a place you arrive at by effort. It's what happens when effort is no longer required. Thinking and examining fade away. The mind rests in one-pointed stillness. Not because you push the thoughts out, but because they've served their purpose and naturally subsided. Imagine a flame in a windless room. At first, the flame flickers. It moves with the currents of air, bending and shifting. But when the air settles, the flame becomes still. It burns steady and bright, no longer pulled in different directions. The second jhana is like that. The mind is no longer flickering with thought. It rests in its own light. You might notice this happening in your own practice. You're sitting with the breath, and at some point the breath becomes less interesting. Not in a dull way, but in the sense that you don't need to track it so closely anymore. The mind has absorbed the rhythm. It knows where to rest. And when you let go of following the breath so deliberately, something else comes forward. A feeling of ease. A sense of being held by the stillness itself. This is the moment to trust what's happening. You don't need to keep doing what brought you here. The breath was a vehicle, and now the vehicle has brought you to a threshold you can step across. You can let the thinking fall away and rest in the calm that's already present. It's not that thoughts disappear entirely. They might still arise at the edges, but they don't pull you anymore. They don't demand your attention. The mind has found something more satisfying than thinking. It has found the feeling of its own quiet. This is not a blank state. It's not numbness or disconnection. It's a very alive stillness. There's a brightness to it, a sense of clarity that doesn't need words. The flame in the windowless room isn't dim. It's steady and clear, burning without disturbance. When you practice, you can feel for this. You can notice when the mind is still working, still following, still checking, and you can notice when it's ready to stop. There's a softness that comes when concentration has done its job, a sense that you don't need to hold on so tightly. When you feel that softness, you can let go. You can rest in the feeling of calm itself without needing to do anything to maintain it. This doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes the mind dips into this stillness for a moment and then comes back to thinking. That's fine. You're learning what it feels like when mental chatter naturally subsides. You're learning to recognize the difference between a mind that's working and a mind that's resting. Each time you touch that stillness, even briefly, you're training yourself to trust it more. The second jhana is not about achievement. It's about release. It's about letting the mind stop doing what it no longer needs to do. And when that happens, the flame stops flickering. It burns steady. It rests in its own light, undisturbed. When you first sit down to practice, something bright might arrive. The breath becomes clear. The body softens. A warmth spreads through your chest, and you feel lifted, almost buoyant. This is rapture, the kind of joy that announces itself. It feels like progress. It feels like you've finally gotten somewhere. And then, without warning, it fades. The brightness dims. The lift disappears. What remains is quieter, less thrilling. You might think something has gone wrong. You might wonder if you lost your concentration, if you did something incorrectly. The mind starts searching for that earlier feeling, trying to recreate the conditions that brought it. But the more you reach for it, the further it seems to go. This is where many people turn away from their practice. They believe the fading of rapture means the meditation has failed. They don't realize they're standing at the edge of something deeper. Rapture is like fireworks, brilliant, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. It lights up the whole sky. But fireworks don't last. They flare and fade, and when they're gone, the night returns. What you might not notice in your longing for that brightness is the steady glow of embers that remain. Embers don't shout, they don't demand attention, but they hold heat, they endure. The Buddha spoke of this shift clearly. As rapture fades, a deeper happiness remains, steady, like the earth beneath your feet. This is not a lesser state. It is not a consolation prize. It is contentment, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't rise and fall with the same drama. It simply is. But we resist it. We resist it because it feels ordinary. It doesn't give us the same thrill, the same sense of accomplishment. We've been trained to equate intensity with value. If something doesn't feel strong, we assume it's weak. If it doesn't feel exciting, we think it's boring. And so we overlook the very stability we've been seeking. You can see this happen in the body. When rapture is present, there's often a tingling, a sense of energy moving through the limbs, a lightness in the chest. When it fades, the body might feel heavier, more grounded. The breath becomes less dramatic. The sensations become more subtle. And the mind, if it's not careful, interprets this as loss. But nothing has been lost. What's happened is that the nervous system has settled. The initial excitement of concentration has given way to something more sustainable. The fireworks have burned out, and now you can feel the warmth of the embers, the kind of warmth that doesn't flicker, that doesn't need to be fed constantly. This is where the practice deepens. Not in the brightness, but in the willingness to stay with what's quieter. Not in the thrill, but in the trust that steadiness has its own value. Notice when excitement in practice gives way to something calmer, and welcome that shift. This is not a technique you apply once. It's an ongoing recognition. You'll feel the pull toward intensity again and again. The mind will want to chase the high, to recreate the conditions that brought rapture. And each time, you have a choice. You can follow that pull, or you can relax into what's already here. Welcoming doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel grateful. It doesn't mean pretending you're not disappointed. It means noticing the disappointment, noticing the reaching, and choosing not to follow it. It means letting the breath be ordinary, letting the body be heavy if it's heavy, letting the mind be calm without needing it to be ecstatic. This is equanimity, not the absence of feeling, but the absence of clinging. Not indifference, but balance. You can feel the difference between rapture and contentment without needing rapture to return. You can appreciate the fireworks without demanding they keep exploding. You can sit with the embers and feel their steady warmth without wishing they would blaze. The deeper happiness the Buddha spoke of is not something you achieve. It's something you allow. It's what remains when you stop insisting that practice should feel a certain way. When you stop measuring your meditation by its intensity. When you stop treating calmness as a problem to be solved. And here's what becomes clear. If you stay with it long enough, the embers were there all along. Even when the fireworks were lighting up the sky, the embers were glowing beneath them. You just couldn't see them through the brightness. Now, in the quieter space, you can. And they're enough. They've always been enough. There is a kind of happiness we trust and a kind we do not. The one we trust comes with a charge. It arrives when something good happens, when we are praised or desired or entertained. It moves through us like electricity. We feel it in the chest, in the face, in the speed of our thoughts. We call this aliveness. We believe it proves we are engaged with the world. The other kind of happiness makes no noise. It does not announce itself. It does not depend on anything changing or improving. It simply rests like a lake at dawn, perfectly still, reflecting the sky without disturbance. We pass by this contentment every day and do not recognize it. We think it is too quiet to be real. In the third jhana, the teaching says, even joy subsides. What remains is pure contentment and clear awareness. This is not a loss. It is a deepening. The brightness that accompanied earlier stages of concentration, the pleasure, the rapture, begins to settle. Not because something went wrong, but because the mind no longer needs that kind of fuel. The stillness becomes self-sustaining. We are not used to this. We have learned to measure our well-being by how stimulated we feel. If the day is flat, we assume something is missing. If the mind is quiet, we grow suspicious. We reach for the phone, for a snack, for a plan. We do not sit still long enough to notice what is already here. Sit with whatever arises and notice the quiet satisfaction that exists beneath all changing states. This is not a search. You are not trying to create contentment or summon it from somewhere else. You are simply noticing what does not need to be built. The breath moves in and out. The body sits. Thoughts come and go. Beneath all of this there is a quality of okayness that does not depend on any of it going well. At first this may feel like nothing. The mind is used to peaks. It wants the rush of a good idea, the warmth of approval, the sharpness of insight. When those are absent, we think we are bored. But boredom is not emptiness. It is restlessness, meeting stillness, and not yet understanding what it has found. The lake at dawn does not work to be still. It is not suppressing waves. The conditions have simply aligned. No wind, no disturbance, and the water reflects everything without effort. In the same way, contentment is not something you produce. It is what remains when you stop asking the mind to perform. This is where impermanence becomes visible in a new way. You begin to see that the happiness you trusted, the one that depended on excitement, was always conditional. It required the right circumstances, the right mood, the right amount of novelty. When those conditions changed, the happiness dissolved. You thought this was normal. You thought happiness was supposed to come and go, but the contentment beneath does not come and go in the same way. It is not built from conditions, so it does not collapse when conditions shift. It is more like the space in which conditions appear. The breath changes, sensations change, thoughts change. The awareness that holds them does not. You do not need to be in deep meditation to touch this. You can notice it now, in the gap between two thoughts, in the moment after you set something down, in the brief pause before you reach for the next thing. There is a quality there that asks for nothing. It is not waiting to be improved. It is not incomplete. Most of us have been taught that this kind of quiet is a problem to solve. We think it means we are not fully alive, not fully engaged. So we add more plans, more input, more intensity. We mistake stimulation for vitality. We mistake the absence of excitement for the absence of life. But if you sit long enough, you begin to see the difference. Pleasure that depends on conditions is always slightly anxious. It knows it will not last. It clings to the moment, trying to extract as much as it can before the feeling fades. Contentment that simply is does not cling. It does not need the moment to be different. It meets whatever arises without resistance, like the surface of the lake meeting the light. This is not passivity. It is not resignation. It is the deepest kind of stability. When you are not dependent on conditions to feel okay, you are free to meet conditions as they are. You do not need to control the weather. You do not need to engineer your mood. You can sit in the middle of an ordinary moment and find that it is enough. The practice is just this. Notice what does not need to be fixed. Notice the breath that continues without your management. Notice the body that sits without needing permission. Notice the awareness that holds all of this without strain. And notice beneath the changing surface the quiet satisfaction that has been here all along. You sit down to meditate, hoping to feel better, maybe calmer, maybe lighter. And sometimes you do feel those things. The breath softens, the shoulders drop. A warmth spreads through the chest. You think, this is it. This is peace. But then the feeling fades, the warmth cools, the lightness becomes ordinary again. And you wonder where the peace went. The Buddha spoke of states called jhanas, deep absorptions where the mind gathers and steadies. In the first, there is pleasure and joy born from seclusion. In the second, the joy grows quieter, more unified. In the third, even the joy subsides and a calm happiness remains. And in the fourth, jhana, even that happiness is released. What remains is pure equanimity and clarity. Not bliss, not comfort, just a vast, steady knowing. This is not what we expect. We have been taught that peace is a feeling. That if we meditate enough, practice enough, refine our attention enough, we will arrive at a state that feels unmistakably good. And we will stay there. But the fourth jhana points elsewhere. It suggests that the deepest peace is not a feeling at all. It is what holds the feelings. The sky that holds all weather but is touched by none of it. You can watch this in your own experience. Sit quietly and notice what arises. A pleasant sensation in the belly, a tightness in the jaw, a flicker of irritation, a moment of ease. These come and go, they always have. But there is something that does not come and go, the awareness that knows them. This awareness does not prefer the pleasant over the unpleasant. It does not cling to ease or push away tension. It simply receives. The sky does not lean toward the sun and away from the rain. It holds both without effort. We spend so much energy trying to engineer the right feeling. We adjust the posture, we change the technique, we return to the breath hoping it will deliver us into calm. And sometimes it does. But then we become dependent on that calm. We begin to measure every session by whether we feel good. And when we do not, we think we have failed. The fourth jhana undoes this. It shows that peace is not the result of feeling good. Peace is what remains when we stop needing to feel anything in particular. This does not mean we ignore sensations. It means we stop giving them so much weight. A pleasant sensation arises, we notice it, we do not grab it. An unpleasant sensation arises, we notice it, we do not push it away. A neutral sensation arises, we notice it too, without dismissing it as boring or empty. This is the practice. Rest in awareness itself. Not in what awareness contains, but in the knowing. The space that holds the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral without favoring any of them. You do not have to reach the fourth jhana to touch this. You do not need years of retreat or perfect concentration. You only need to stop insisting that peace must feel a certain way. Sit with what is here. The breath, the body, the sounds, the thoughts. Let them be as they are. Do not try to improve them. Do not try to make them last or make them leave. Just notice that you are aware of them. And notice that this awareness is not disturbed by what it holds. The sky does not become cloudy when clouds pass through. It remains sky. Awareness does not become anxious when anxiety arises. It remains awareness. This is what the fourth jhana reveals. That equanimity is not a state you enter. It is what you are when you stop chasing states. You may still feel pleasure in meditation. You may still feel joy. These are not wrong. They are part of the path. But they are not the destination. The destination is the willingness to be present without needing anything to be different. To sit with discomfort as openly as you sit with ease. To meet boredom with the same clarity you meet bliss. When you rest here, you are not waiting for peace to arrive. You are noticing that it was never absent. It was only hidden beneath the demand that experience be other than it is. The breath moves, sensations shift, thoughts appear and dissolve, and through it all there is this quiet knowing, untouched, unshaken. Not because it is numb, but because it is vast enough to hold everything without being defined by anything. This is the peace prior to feeling, the sky that holds all weather but is touched by none of it. There is a state you can enter where the breath becomes so smooth it almost disappears. The body settles, the mind grows still and bright. You may feel wrapped in ease, or lifted into clarity, or held in a silence so complete that the world outside seems like a distant memory. These are the jhanas, states of deep absorption that the Buddha himself practiced and taught. They are real. They are not imagination. And they can become a trap. The trap is not the state itself. The trap is what we do with it. We sit in that stillness and think, this is it, this is freedom, we have arrived. The mind is finally quiet, the body finally at peace, and we believe we have touched something permanent. We mistake the raft for the far shore. The jhanas are a raft. They carry you across turbulent water. They give you rest when the mind has been scattered, when craving has pulled you in 10 directions, when the world has felt too sharp to bear. In deep concentration, all of that falls away. There is just this: breath, light, stillness, ease. It is a profound relief. But relief is not liberation. Even the highest samadhi is still a conditioned state. It arises because certain causes come together. You sit in a certain way, you steady your attention. You let go of distraction again and again until the mind grows unified. The jhana appears. But because it arises from conditions, it will also pass. When you stand up, When you open your eyes, when the bell rings or the dog barks or your knee starts to ache, the absorption fades. What seemed so solid dissolves like mist. This is not a failure. This is the nature of all conditioned things. And this is where the real teaching begins. The Buddha did not reject the jhanas. He taught them, he valued them. But he also said, do not mistake the finger for the moon. The jhanas point toward freedom, but they are not freedom itself. They are tools. They steady the mind so you can see clearly. They quiet the noise so you can observe what remains. What remains is this: even in the deepest absorption, there is still a sense of someone absorbed. There is still a subtle clinging to the state, a hope that it will last, a fear that it will end. There is still the process of perception, the activity of mind, the constructed nature of experience. The jhana feels like a refuge, and in a way, it is. But it is not the end of suffering. It is a place to rest before you look more deeply. After deep concentration, there is a practice. You do not cling to the state. You do not chase it when it fades. Instead, you turn your attention toward it the way you would turn toward anything else that arises. You observe how the jhana came to be. You notice the conditions that supported it, the stillness of the body, the steadiness of breath, the letting go of thought. You see that it is constructed piece by piece from causes, and then you watch it pass. This is not about dismantling something beautiful. This is about seeing clearly. The jhana is like a raft that has carried you across the river. When you reach the far shore, you do not strap the raft to your back and carry it with you. You set it down. You honor what it did for you, and you walk on. The far shore is the direct seeing of non-self. It is the recognition that even in the most refined states, there is no solid separate self to be found. There is process. There is arising and passing. There is the play of conditions, but there is no one standing apart from it all, no permanent witness, no unchanging essence. Even the absorbed mind is empty of self. This is not a cold teaching. It is not a rejection of peace. It is an invitation to stop grasping. When you see that even the jhanas are conditioned, you stop needing them to last. You can enter them without clinging. You can rest in them without fear. And when they fade, you do not chase after them or feel that you have lost something essential. You see them for what they are, temporary formations, like clouds passing through a clear sky. Useful, beautiful, but not the sky itself. So the practice is this: sit and steady the mind. Let the concentration deepen. If a jhana arises, rest in it. Let it hold you, but do not stop there. When you emerge, or even while you are still inside it, notice. Notice how it feels. Notice how it came to be. Notice how it changes, even in its stillness. Notice that there is no one possessing it, only the experience itself unfolding. This is how the raft becomes a teaching. Not by abandoning it, but by seeing through it. The jhanas are not the enemy of insight. They are its support. But only if you do not confuse the tool for the work, the finger for the moon, the raft for the far shore. There is a quiet worry that lives in many meditators. It goes something like this: if I go too deep, if I taste real stillness, the world will lose its color. Ordinary life will feel coarse, loud, unbearable. The fear is that concentration will split you in two: one part longing for silence, the other stuck in the noise of daily existence. This fear makes sense. We have all known moments when returning from peace feels like a small violence. A weekend retreat ends and the subway feels too bright, too fast. A quiet morning sit dissolves into email and errands. The contrast can be sharp enough to make you wonder if depth is worth the cost. But this is not what the jhanas are for. These states of deep absorption, where the mind gathers itself completely, where attention becomes steady and luminous, are not an escape hatch. They are not a place to hide from the world. The bodhisattva enters deep meditation not to escape the world, but to return to it with greater clarity and compassion. The depth is not the destination, it is preparation. Think of a diver surfacing slowly, bringing the silence of the depths back to the surface. The diver does not stay below. The point is not to live underwater. The point is to know what silence feels like in the body, to let it settle into the nervous system, and then to rise carefully, without rushing, so that some quality of that depth remains available even in the light. The jhanas teach the mind to unify. When attention is scattered, everything feels effortful. You are here and also thinking about there. You are listening but also planning. The mind splits itself across a dozen tasks and wonders why it feels tired. Concentration gathers that scattered energy back into one place. It is not about forcing focus. It is about letting the mind do what it naturally wants to do when it is not being pulled in 10 directions. When you sit and the breath becomes smooth, when the body softens and the mind begins to settle into a single current of attention, you are not leaving the world. You are learning how attention actually works. You are training the mind to be where it is. That capacity does not vanish when you stand up. It comes with you. The worry that depth will ruin ordinary life comes from a misunderstanding. It assumes that concentration is about preference, that you will become someone who only wants silence, who finds noise intolerable, who cannot bear the mess of human interaction. But concentration is not preference, it is capacity. It is the ability to be fully present with what is happening, whether that is stillness or sound, solitude or conversation. A diver who knows the depths does not hate the surface. The diver simply knows both. The silence below does not make the light above unbearable. It makes the light more vivid. You see the way sun fractures through water. You notice the shift in pressure, the way temperature changes as you rise. The depth gives you reference points. It lets you see what you were swimming through all along. This is where the practice becomes concrete. After sitting, move slowly into your day and notice how stillness informs action. Do not rush from the cushion to the phone. Do not leap from silence into noise as if you need to catch up. Stand slowly. Feel your weight shift. Notice the air on your skin. Let the quality of attention you cultivated in stillness stay with you as you walk to the kitchen, as you fill the kettle, as you hear the water begin to heat. You are not trying to preserve the jhana, you are noticing what remains. Maybe it is a softness in the chest. Maybe it is the way sound does not startle you as quickly. Maybe it is just a small gap between hearing a question and reacting to it. These are not dramatic shifts, they are quiet ones. But they matter. The more you practice this, sitting deeply, then moving slowly, the less separate the two worlds become. Stillness is not something you leave behind. It is something you carry in the way you listen, in the way you pause before speaking, in the way you meet difficulty without immediately bracing against it. This is what compassion looks like when it is rooted in concentration. You are not overwhelmed by the world because you have learned to steady yourself. You are not numbed by depth because you have learned to bring it with you. The jhanas do not make life dull. They make you capable of meeting life without fragmenting. The diver surfaces slowly, and the silence comes too, not as a memory, but as a quality woven into the way you move through your day. You sit to practice, and the mind begins to wander almost immediately. Maybe it's restlessness first, a fidgeting in the legs, a pull towards something else, or doubt arrives quietly, whispering that this isn't working, that you're doing it wrong. The breath feels thin and unconvincing. You notice distraction, aversion, sleepiness, and beneath all of it, a quiet belief that these states are problems to be solved before the real practice can begin. The Buddha called these the 5 hindrances: desire for sense pleasure, ill will, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, doubt. They appear in meditation and they appear in life. And the usual response is to see them as obstacles, as things standing between you and clarity. But the teaching points elsewhere. The hindrances are not enemies. They show you where the mind is still caught. This is not a comforting idea at first. It means that when aversion arises, sharp and tight in the chest, it is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is information. It tells you that the mind is resisting what is here. It shows you the exact shape of clinging in this moment. Like clouds that reveal the direction of the wind, the hindrances make visible what is otherwise hidden. They move across awareness, and in their movement you can see what the mind is doing. Aversion is particularly clear in this way. It arrives as a push, a no, a turning away. You might feel it toward a sound, a sensation, a thought, or toward the hindrance itself. The body tightens, the breath shortens. There is a quality of refusal. And if you treat this as a problem to fix, you add a second layer of aversion on top of the first. Now you are pushing away the pushing away. The mind doubles back on itself. But if you pause, if you let the aversion be there without immediately trying to dissolve it, something else becomes possible. You can name it softly, just the word, quiet and without judgment. Aversion. And then you can feel it. Not think about it, not analyze why it's here, but notice what it actually feels like in the body. The tightness in the jaw, the heat in the chest, the way the shoulders pull forward. This is not an exercise in self-improvement. It is simply seeing what is already happening. When you do this, the hindrance does not always disappear. Sometimes it stays, sometimes it shifts, sometimes it dissolves and returns a moment later. But the relationship changes. You are no longer fighting it. You are watching it the way you might watch clouds moving across the sky. The clouds do not ask permission. They do not apologize. They show you which way the wind is blowing, and then they move on. This is where the path deepens. The jhanas, those states of deep meditative absorption, are often spoken of as if they exist on the other side of the hindrances. As if you must first clear away restlessness and doubt, and only then can concentration settle into stillness. But the teaching suggests something more nuanced. Working with the hindrances is not a detour. It is part of the path itself. Each time you meet a hindrance without adding struggle, you are training the mind in a kind of release. You are learning to let experience be what it is. The practice is simple, though not always easy. When a hindrance arises, you name it. Restlessness, doubt, aversion. You say it softly, as if you were noting the weather, and then you turn your attention to the body. Where do you feel this? What is the texture of it? Is it sharp or dull, moving or still, heavy or tight? You are not trying to fix it. You are not trying to make it go away. You are simply meeting it with attention. This changes the quality of sitting. The hindrances stop being interruptions and become part of the field of awareness. They are clouds, yes, but they are also the wind itself, showing you where the mind is still holding on. And when you see this clearly, without judgment, the holding begins to soften. Not because you forced it to, but because you stopped feeding it with resistance. The mind learns slowly. It will return to the old pattern of seeing hindrances as problems. That is fine. That is also information. Each time you notice the pattern, you are seeing more clearly. Each time you meet aversion with curiosity, instead of more aversion, you are walking the path. The jhanas may come, or they may not. But the understanding that the hindrances are teachers, not obstacles, is already a kind of freedom. It is already a loosening of the knot. There is a state you may have heard about or tasted briefly where the mind becomes very still. The body feels light, or it disappears altogether. There is ease and quiet and a sense of arrival. These are the jhanas, states of deep absorption that the Buddha taught and entered himself. They are real, they are not myths, and they can become a problem if we mistake them for the end of the path. The problem is not the states themselves. The problem is what we do with them once we have touched them. We think we have arrived somewhere. We think the work is done. Or worse, we think the work only matters when it leads us back to that place, to that particular flavor of stillness. And so the practice becomes about chasing a memory, about trying to reconstruct a moment that has already passed. The breath that was here at the beginning, still here now, unchanged and always available, becomes invisible again. We stop noticing it because we are looking for something else, something we believe is higher or truer. In Zen, there is a teaching that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It is not poetic decoration, it is instruction. The wood does not become sacred wood once you have seen clearly. The water does not taste different. The tasks remain. The breath remains. What changes is not the content of your life, but the way you meet it. And if you are waiting for the moment when chopping wood no longer feels like chopping wood, you will miss the chopping entirely. The jhanas can feel like proof. Proof that the practice works, proof that you are doing it right, proof that there is something beyond the ordinary clutter of the mind. And all of that may be true. But if you hold that proof too tightly, it becomes another thing to protect, another thing to measure yourself against. You sit down to meditate, and you are no longer meeting this breath. You are trying to get back to that other place, the one you remember, the one that felt so complete. And the more you try, the further it seems. Not because you are doing it wrong, but because you are doing something other than what is here. The breath that was here at the beginning is still here now. It has not changed. It has not become less valuable because you once touched something deeper. It is the same breath moving in and out, asking nothing of you except that you notice it. The jhanas, when they come, arise from this. They do not replace it. They do not make it obsolete. They are a deepening of the same attention you bring to a single inhale on an ordinary morning. This is where the practice becomes very simple again. Not because you are starting over, but because you are returning to what was never absent. One breath, fully received, without needing it to be anything more. Not a breath that will take you somewhere. Not a breath that proves you are awake. Just a breath, arriving and leaving the way breath does. You do not have to make it special. You do not have to make it into a state. You only have to receive it. When you sit, you may notice the mind reaching for depth, for stillness, for the feeling you once had. You can notice that reaching without judging it. It is just another movement of the mind, another form of wanting. And beneath that wanting, the breath continues. It does not wait for you to be ready. It does not require you to be calm first. It is already here, already doing what it does. You can meet it right now, in the middle of the reaching, in the middle of the disappointment, in the middle of the wondering whether you are doing this correctly. The jhanas are not the destination. They are part of the path, the same way a clearing in the forest is part of the forest. You may rest there, you may find relief there, but the path continues. And if you try to stay in the clearing, if you refuse to move because you believe this is where you were meant to end up, you will miss what comes next. Not because what comes next is more important, but because the path is not a line that stops. It is a returning, again and again, to what is most immediate. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After the jhana, the breath. After the insight, the next moment. The practice does not graduate you out of the ordinary. It teaches you to meet the ordinary without needing it to be otherwise. And that meeting, that simple return to what is here, is both the path and the destination. They are not separate. They have never been separate. The breath that carried you into stillness is the same breath that meets you now, unchanged, unhurried, and always available. The jhanas are not possessions. They are not achievements you carry forward into the next day like a certificate or a badge. They are moments of stillness that arise when conditions allow, and they dissolve when conditions change. This is not a failure. This is how all experience moves. You may sit tomorrow and find nothing resembling what you touched today. The breath may feel rough, the body may resist, thoughts may crowd in without pause. This does not mean you have lost something, it means conditions are different. The practice remains the same. You return to what is here, you notice what arises, you let it move. There is a quiet kindness in this. You are not chasing a state you once knew. You are meeting this breath, this body, this moment. The jhanas taught you that peace is possible. They showed you that the mind can settle. That lesson does not vanish when the state fades. It becomes part of how you see. Some days the door opens easily, other days it stays closed. Both days are practice. Both days ask the same thing. Can you be here without demanding that experience be other than it is? Can you sit with restlessness as openly as you sit with calm? Can you meet frustration without turning it into a story about failure? The jhanas are not the goal. They are a rest along the way. They show you what becomes possible when craving quiets, when aversion softens, when the mind stops spinning. But the deeper work is learning to carry that quality into the parts of life that are not still, into the conversations that irritate you, into the tasks that bore you, into the moments when nothing feels peaceful at all. You do not need to be absorbed in bliss to practice kindness. You do not need a concentrated mind to notice when you are clinging. The jhanas refine your attention, but attention itself is always available, right here, in the feeling of your hands, in the sound of the room, in the simple fact of breathing. This is not about becoming someone who meditates perfectly. It is about becoming someone who notices, who pauses, who does not believe every thought that arises. The jhanas help with this, but so does every moment you choose to return. Every time you catch yourself lost in a story and come back to the body. Every time you feel anger rising and do not act from it immediately. Every time you meet discomfort without needing to fix it right away. The path does not end when you stand up from the cushion. It continues in how you move through the day, in how you listen, in how you respond when things do not go as planned. The stillness you touch in meditation is not separate from the rest of your life. It is the same awareness meeting different conditions. You will forget this many times. You will get caught in reactivity, in wanting, in the belief that something outside you will finally bring peace. This is not a problem. This is the practice. You notice, you return, again and again. Not because you are broken, but because this is how a mind learns. The jhanas are a gift. They show you what is possible when you stop fighting experience, when you stop trying to make this moment into something else, when you let the breath be exactly as it is, and the body be exactly as it is, and the mind settle into its own natural quiet. But the gift is not the state itself. The gift is what you learn from it. That peace is not far away. That it does not require perfect conditions. That it is woven into the simplest things, breath, sensation, presence. So you return to the cushion, not to chase what you felt before, but to meet what is here now. You sit with whatever arises. You let it come. You let it go. You do this again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not because you're trying to get somewhere, but because this is how you live with an open heart. The practice continues. It is always continuing. Each breath is a beginning. Each moment an invitation to notice, to soften, to return. If you would like to continue, there are other practices waiting, other ways to explore this path. But there is no rush. You can sit here a little longer. Let the silence settle. Let the mind rest in its own spaciousness. The door is always open. You can walk through it whenever you are ready.